If the narrative surrounding social issues appears to become ever more fractured, it is. The causative elements are without number. What makes the issue even more confused is that we have two major positions or points of view, each accusing the other of everything under the sun. The natural thing to do is to join one side of the other and join the debate voicing this perspective to the exclusion of any position less extreme. Each side accuses the other of extremism. Well, extreme compared to what? To the other end of the political spectrum? But politics has two ends, and both are equally distant from the other. If the left is too intense in its protection of minority rights, then is the right too extreme in its denial of responsibility for anyone or their condition? But the more rights of more identified minorities the left finds to care for, the more adamant the right becomes that their perceived weakness and need puts no burden on them. The left is accused of being the party of communists. The state, according to how the right sees them, is devoted to caring for every disabled, disgruntled, disadvantaged and displaced person they can find. It does not matter the cost or the level of disruption the intervention causes, the needs of the needy must be met and indeed, prioritized over the needs of the middle-class worker, and seems increasingly to be the case, the white, Christian male. Needless to say, it is increasingly the white, Christian male who takes umbrage at this position of the left. Those on the right are seen as racist, misogynist, xenophobic, patriarchal, and probably much else, in their steadfast refusal to admit that they have any responsibility to anyone but their own selves and perhaps, their own class and race. The question then becomes, for those few who have committed themselves to one side or the other, how do we convince those on one side to come over to the other side if they believe everything that is wrong is birthed on that other side? Do we expect a communist to become a capitalist in order to fix the problems created by capitalism? Will a person on the far right embrace the state's nationalization of the means of production to solve the nation's social problems? But the porosity of the two sides, as people flip-flop from one side to the other, gives both sides hope that the other side will one day see reason. But even such considerations betray a particular point of view, because the left thinks the problem is a lack of empathy on the right, and it is the right who believe the left needs to start thinking logically and with less emotion. Meanwhile, the left introduces the idea of emotional intelligence as a way to protect themselves against accusations of irrationality. The left is not irrational, liberals say, they just think in a way different from the cold and heartless way conservatives think. What we seem to have is two diametrically opposed world views. However, the dispassionate observer will note that the differences between them are not as great as one might suppose. Indeed, the left and right tend to be mirror images, the differences are due more to a point of view, than actual contradictory positions. One might even say the differences are one of degree and lack any qualitative distinctions, which is why people can so easily move right and left as they age or encounter a serious case of victimization. The right cares for the victim. The right sympathizes the independent individual. In the mind of the right, we have a right to succeed to the limit of our ability. We owe no one anything. The left sees things differently as they tend to think the world is a commonwealth in which everyone has a share. They see successful individuals as persons who have deprived many others of what rightfully belongs to them. The people have been trapped in this false dichotomy of right and left. There are, however, only two ways to live. This is biblical. We can call these cultures flesh and spirit, saved and unsaved, or church and the world. It is not important what you call the two groups, what is important is where we put the line and which side we are on. The line is quantifiable because it is defined by works or the degree to which one is a parasite. We are created to add value to the things of God. This is how we civilize the world. It is how we build the church. We cannot do this in this system constructed from capitalism, democracy, and liberalism. But communism, tyranny, and fascism is not going to get you any closer, so do not fall into the trap of hopping from one false difference to another. The differences are cosmetic and one of degree. It's not a true alternative. We need a populist uprising that gives people back their power. This is a technical problem based on property ownership. Without property we are powerless. The process requires works of faith. We need to build the church. The solution is in the Bible, it is all there. Those passages no one reads and are applied even less, are the crucial ones. But we cannot follow them in a system designed by the father of lies. We need to eliminate parasitism by following the Bible. Scripture is to be implemented without qualification. Sin is not an excuse for anyone but those who want one. Globalism is a consequence of parasitism. But the conventional left and right both play into the globalist narrative, because both are grounded in politics. Politicians have nothing to give anyone other than what they can expropriate. And so politicians, that is political parties, need enemies because they need a target group to expropriate wealth from to dispense to others, who are their allies. Politics is rapine by other means. Political parties in power rob Peter so they can dispense benefits to those who support them. This is how they gain power. The party that wins the election is the party that targets the group most voters hate for more taxation and less benefits, and the group that represents the greatest number of voters to bestow benefits on. We have not moved that far from pork barrel politics. Globalism is predicated on parasitism. Globalist politics, whether on the right or left, is about acquiring property. This can be done directly as in communism, or indirectly as through capitalism and fascism. The left works through their bureaucratic allies whereas the right tends to use financial self-interest to create solid voting blocs. But these political alternatives do not express an incompatible contrast. This is why people flip-flop back and forth between the right and left politically. The true division is cultural, racial and normative. Normative refers to establishing, relating to, or deriving from a standard or norm, especially of behavior. In other words, something that is normative sets out what is considered typical, expected, or appropriate within a particular society, group, or context. Normative principles often guide how individuals or communities believe people ought to act, as opposed to describing what people actually do, which would be descriptive rather than normative. There are two sides to normative analytics, the ethical norms and our moral norms. Ethics represent the beliefs of your external community, while your morals are your personal, internal sense of right and wrong. The community forms laws and regulations. As a moral person we formulate principles and ontological purposes or goals. Regardless, our rules or norms allow us to externalize costs onto society and future generations, or not. There are no graduations. We might be parasitic in worse ways. But what we do is either parasitic, or not. If we are not parasitic, we may add a lot of value to assets by our work, or less, but we add value if we are not parasitic. There is a line. It is an infinitesimally thin line but it exists, and it can be quantified, in the sense that our level of parasitism and the amount of value we add to assets, can be quantified. If we are parasitic, we must justify our expropriation. This is done through the mechanisms of social justice. Politicians argue that for the greater good, they must be permitted to do a small wrong. That wrong is defrauding you of what belongs to you to give to someone else. More importantly, these exactions need to be institutionalized and made normative. This is done through the legal system. Globalists are legalists because it is the law that enables and justifies the expropriations of the state and its allies. Unfortunately, the existence of democracy creates a system that perpetuates and exacerbates the expropriation. If the parasitic voter is identified as the constituency to be prioritized, the party must discover new things to fund. The parasite must be identified as a victim requiring social justice based on their identity. This is how the expropriation is justified. But if the total remuneration is $10,000 this year, then the benefit must be increased to attract the parasite's vote. It will help if the other party is promising to cut benefits, but usually more needs to be added to the pot of benefits to give the party a talking point. A party running for election has to have a platform and this cannot be limited to promising to do nothing. And it will not help much if the platform promises to cut back benefits, and so the platform will invariably promise more benefits of some kind, packaged in some sort of policy. Therefore, over time, the need to get elected will ratchet up the size of the benefit package. This means less for the people and more power for the state. Democracy and the need to get elected pushes the state towards globalism. It need not be intentional, but a political party that promises to do nothing and promises to reduce spending substantially, is likely to draw the ire of large numbers of persons. People are less likely to demonstrate in support of measures that reduce taxation as they are to demonstrate against measures that take benefits away. So, the natural tendency for any democracy, is towards globalism and towards a one-world government that owns and controls everything. The state, even when it knows this, is in a dilemma. Those who are self-sufficient and law-abiding do not need the state. The state is needed by criminals. The state is not needed by those who look at the straw in their own eye and focus on fixing their own faults, rather than the faults of others. But those who see the problem as being everyone else, wants lots of regulations to change the behavior of everyone else. The law is a reflection of the priorities of people who do not look at the beam in their own eye. It is these people, the one who wants the state to fix the problems that others represent, but are less troubled by the problems they represent, that produce the conditions and dynamics that ultimately push us all into a globalist system. The more people want the state to fix the problems represented by other people, the faster we move to a globalist system.